Okay, this video is about linear equations, and the first thing we're going to look at is ask the question, what is an equation? Well, an equation is something that we can solve. Okay, we solve equations, and that means finding out the value of a letter in something like this. So I'm going to give you a really simple example. X plus 1 equals 10. So x is the letter in our equation. Notice there's an equal sign. There's always an equal sign in an equation because the word equation comes from equals. So there's a clue. Whenever you see an equal sign in between some letters and numbers, and you're asked to solve it, then you know it's an equation. Okay. It could also be a formula, like a formula from physics. We've got V equals U plus AT. Velocity equals initial velocity plus acceleration times time. That's what that means. That is considered an equation as well, because we could solve it because we can work out the value of any one of those letters as long as we know the other three. Okay, so if you look at this equation, it's almost as if these two numbers were letters. We know the value of them now, so we can work out the value of x. And obviously x equals 9. You can see that because 9 plus 1 equals 10. And this means we have solved the equation. Okay? So an equation is something equals something else, and we can solve it. We can find the value of a letter, usually x, but it could be any letter, within our equation. A common misconception is that anything with an equal sign is an equation. Well, it's not. Okay, formulae is plural, sorry for formula. Formulae are types of equation, and so are these. But this 2x equals 2x is not an equation. Okay, it's an identity. We're saying this side is just the same as this side. You can't solve it. You can't find the value of x, because if you think about it, if I put x equal to 5, then we're saying 2 times 5, which is 10, equals 2 times 5, which is 10. So we're saying 10 equals 10. Okay, so if x was 5, we get that. Well, that's not an equation. There's nothing to solve there. I'm just saying 10 equals 10. It's true, but you can't do anything with it. But x could be something else. It could be 7. 2 times 7 is 14, equals 2 times 7 is 14. So if x was 7, we'd have that. So basically, if you think about it, x could be anything. So it can't be solved, because there isn't a value of x that does not fit in there. Any value of x will work. If you put 0.5, 2 times 0.5 is 1, equals 2 times 0.5 is 1. Okay, so this is not an equation. Okay, this is not an equation by here. Really, it's the wrong symbol. When two things are exactly the same, identical, that's where the word identity comes from, then we should use this symbol. And you may not have seen this before. It's just 3 lines. And we often say equivalent to rather than equals to. So 2x is equivalent to 2x. Alright? So this is the wrong thing to write down, really. So just because if somebody wrote an equal sign there and 2x does equal 2x, it's not an equation because we can't solve it. What do I mean by a linear equation? Well, a linear equation, the word linear comes from line, and more specifically we're talking about straight lines. So if I bring my ruler over here and draw a straight line, because I can't do it without the ruler, that's a straight line. And linear equations are to do with straight lines. So basically, if I straight lines, linear. and look at the word linear, the first part of it is line. Okay, now this is a line. This is a line also. If I do a freehand, it's not linear though. We don't class that as linear because it's not straight. Okay, so that's not linear. So what do I mean about an equation being linear, being a straight line? Well, we can actually put these equations onto an x and y graph. Okay, x and y axes. So I'm going to get my ruler again. Pick this up though. I'm going to move this up out of the way a second. Now I'm going to get my ruler. Back on here, I'm going to do an x-axis on there, and then quick as I can get that to 90. To a y-axis down the middle, somewhere down the middle. Remember, the y-axis is the vertical axis. What's the easy way to remember? Well, we know this is y because it points to the sky. So y to the sky, and we know this is the x-axis because x is a cross because it is a cross. Okay, well, you don't really need to remember that one. Just need to remember y to the sky. You know the other one's x then. And what do we call in the middle? Put a 0 there because it's 0, 0, but we call that the origin. And that reminds us it's called the origin because it's like an O. Even though it's a 0, it looks like an O, obviously. So if I did a graph of any equation whatsoever, then I would get straight lines. Okay, so I did a graph there, I get a straight line there. If I did another graph, oops, keep doing that. If I did another graph, I get a straight line. If I did another one. So all these straight lines graphed on this x and y axis would all represent linear equations. Okay, and that's something you have to be able to do as well as part of GCSE mathematics. You have to be able to draw the graph of a linear equation. But in order to draw it, we'd have to have y in there as well. But that's for another day. But that's why they're called linear equations, because if we put them on a graph, we would get a lovely straight line because it's linear. Okay, and that's all it means. But the most important keyword associated with equations is this word here, solve. Okay, is this word here, solve. So we solve equations, whereas when we were doing indices and collecting like terms, we simplify those. Okay, but we solve equations. So the exam, for example, if you saw the word solve, you know they're talking about equations. Okay, so that's it for now, and the next few videos will be all about how do we actually solve linear equations. This was a really easy example. We're going to build up until we look at some more complex ones that take more steps. Okay, thanks very much.